Hi, everyone. Welcome to the WFRC Budget Committee meeting for Thursday, October 10th, 2024. We'll call our meeting to order and we'll start with agenda item number 1.
One thing I'd like to do, if you don't mind, just to read the members' attendance
Oh, please.
before we
Yes.
start.
Thank you.
So on the line today, we have Marion Florence, Andrea Pearson, Commissioner Mike Newton, Mayor Jeff Silvestrini, Councilmember Amy Winder Newton, Andrew Gruber, Commissioner Bob Stevenson, Councilmember Scott Wardle, Wayne Benyon, and Kevin Wells. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. So our first item on this agenda is the consent agenda, and we need to take action on the approval of minutes from May, as well as the acceptance of the financial statements and check registers for April, May, June, July, and August. And then we do have a fiscal year 25 budget expenditure report to date, which is in your packet. So are there any questions or comments on these items?
Jeff Silvestrini, I'll make a motion to approve them all.
Okay,
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion by Mayor Silvestrini, and I believe we have Councilman Newton as the second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those pass unanimously. We'll go to agenda item number 2, which is our public comment. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to agenda item number 3. And we'll talk about our budget amendments and audit report. Marion, do you want to kick this off for us?
Great. Yes, thank you. I think we'll start with the budget, which is our routine. Thanks again to everyone for being here today. This is a routine but important part of our budget process. And so what we do annually is, as you know, in March and May, we have an initial budget that looks at our new funding for the coming year. And then here in October, what we do is we have closed out our June 30th. We've closed out at fiscal year 24. So any funds that we had budgeted in fiscal year 24 that we had not used yet for these multi-year projects that we do rolls over into this year. So I'll share my screen and just go over briefly. Is that big enough?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is our draft revised budget. You can see it has June 23 actuals, so FY23 actuals and FY24 actuals, as well as the initial budget that we passed in May. And then any changes are listed in this tiny print on the right. So I will orient you to those changes. And you can see on this expenditure by function, the main almost $4 million additional funds in the budget are in the contractual line. And that is because we haven't changed the salary line. We have a lot of the work that we did in March and May just stays unchanged because those are our estimates for the coming year. The contractual line grows because these are our multi-year projects. They go year to year, and this sort of swells. You'll see this pattern go over all of our years. So you can see that almost $4 million there, and that's from $2.5 million of our Transportation and Land Use Connection Program, those projects that are underway, and then $1 million in the Station Area Planning. That's this program that we've been working on for a couple of years now, in conjunction with MAG, our partners to the south, working on station area plans, and those are all contractual dollars in there. So all of the money that has been allocated by Governor's office is now going through these multiple years and has been added to this year's budget. The other $500,000 is in joint projects because at the in our initial budget, we actually just budget 0 on that joint projects until we really know what we're looking at. And so if we move down,
Marion,
yes.
let me just interject if I may, Madam Chair. Before you move down, let's just pause for 1 sec because Marion has hit on the basic story of our budget, and I just want to make sure it's clear and see if just right now if anybody has any questions. And so just one more time to reiterate, you and the council adopted our budget in May. We finished out the fiscal year. And now, reflecting the close of the fiscal year, we come back as a routine matter in October and update the FY 25 budget. And again, you can see it right here. This is the same thing that happens every year, is we budget contractual projects at their full value in 1 year. We anticipate those are going to carry over multiple years. So at the end of the year, we know how much got done last year. And then whatever didn't get done last year in project and then expenditure carries over into this year. So this significant increase in the contractual line item for FY 25, that's the story of the budget amendment. There's almost nothing else happening. And that is a routine matter that is anticipated.
Right.
So you said that already. I just wanted to emphasize it and just see, Madam Chair, if anybody has any questions about that basic function of the way our budget works before Marion goes into a little more detail about what's happening in that contractual line item.
Got it.
Does anyone have any questions on that? No?
Nope.
Okay,
But also note,
Excellent.
we've been joined by Box Elder Commissioner Perry. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Yeah, I was only going to use the next section as an illustration of this point to show that this is our expenditure by program. So the same expenses, but listed by each of the projects that we're working on. And so where you see additional funds added for this revised budget, those are carry forward funds that have come through. 2.5 million here on the transportation and land use connection, 1 million here on the station area planning, and then various other programs where we have collected funds or have funds available to us that then come carried forward into this fiscal year. And so this again is routine and expected. There isn't anything really out of the ordinary. We talked last time about these 2 new programs that we've added for this year, the Power District Transportation Study and the Mixed Use Centers. So we'd already added those with some foresight in March. And so we did not have to add them in this amended budget. So they're already there.
And both of those are funded by grants that we received. The Power District was a legislative appropriation, and the Mixed Use Centers was a grant through the Department of Commerce.
Yes. So as usual, I've prepared budget footnotes, which go into detail on any change. You can see the numbers here on the very far right column, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
hey, any other questions? I always appreciate how clearly you explain things, Marion. So thank you so much for doing a great job and pointing out kind of the hot button points for us as well. So
Thank you. And of course, if you come up with questions later, anybody, I'm always happy to talk this through.
So actually Andrew, I have a quick question for you. So with Salt Lake doing what they've done with downtown and the stuff that's taking place there, I mean, I know we've got the Power District and stuff we're doing on there. Is there anything we're going to need to do on the downtown with what they passed?
Well, that's a big question.
Yeah.
And the answer.
Okay, well, I can withdraw the question.
No. I'm happy to do a brief on this. And Councilmember Winder Newton might have opinions about this as well. There's a lot to be done for planning and infrastructure with regard to the WFRC budget, if that's what you're asking. We're not aware of anything that we would need to do in adjusting our budget because of the work that's happening there. So I'm not sure if your question is about, do we need to do anything in our budget? We have not yet identified anything that we would need to tweak in our budget related to that. There's lots to be done relating to infrastructure and transportation impacts and growth, et cetera, that we are working and will continue to work with our partners on.
I mean, Bob,
Yeah,
if you want to give us money, Bob, like, I mean, we got roads we got to fix and stuff. We'll spend it.
We can always get Amy money, that's for sure.
So at this point, these are the projects that we know about in our WFRC budget. And if anything else comes up, I will certainly alert you.
Good question. Thank you. Thanks, Bob. Thanks for letting me razz you a little bit. Does anybody have any other questions? And by the way, Commissioner Newton, I'm sorry I called you council member. Habit
Oh,
in
no worries at all.
my county. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, do you want us to take these separately, Marianne? We'll do the budget and then do the audit report
Yes,
second?
please.
That sound
Yeah.
good? Okay, so is there a motion to approve the budget amendments that we just spoke about?
I'm
moved.
sorry, one clarification. In terms of process, the budget committee reviews and then makes a recommendation to our council. So we have our council meeting on the 24th of October, 2 weeks from today. So respectfully, it's a motion to recommend the council approve the amendment.
Thank you. Yes.
I'll make that motion to recommend approval of the 2025 budget amendments to the council as a whole.
I'll second that.
Motion from Commissioner Newton, a second from Councilman Wardle,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Commissioner, Councilman, you know.
Well, and they both changed it a few years ago.
I
So
know, that's why I'm like, you
I
guys are,
still always get confused. Yeah.
one used to be the other.
That's
All
right.
right, so we have a motion on the table. Any further discussion?
Mm-mm.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. We're now going to go to the audit report. And Marianne, do you want to talk
Yes.
about that?
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yes. We have our auditor, John Hatterley here. He's with Larson and Company. And so I want to thank John for joining us. He'll tell you more detail, but we had another clean audit. We're pleased to report that he looked at our compliance on our internal controls. We are deemed a low risk auditee, which is always a nice certification there. And last year, you'll probably remember we had a conversation about the communication with governance that the auditors submitted, and they were able to keep that adjusted language this year. So we're grateful that we were able to work through that last year and that same language is reflected this year in their communications to you, which we sent out. So John, I'm going to hand it over.
Marianne, just
Yes.
if I may, just really briefly, because some of you may not remember that and be like, what? The issue there was initially when the audit firm looks at us, they identify based on the nature of our organization, certain risks. And that's just the nature of the auditing process based on the size or type of an organization. And there was a little confusion last year that made it seem like they had actually come and looked at our books and then said, oh, there's risks. But it actually wasn't that. It was rather, even before looking at anything, it was just the nature of the organization created these risks that they were looking at. So we worked with John, and I remember Mayor Silvestrini, you had raised this issue, and so we had a clarification. And so Marion was careful to make sure in working with John that we had that was still clear, appropriately stated in the communication this year. Hopefully I did justice to that briefly.
Yes. Here, I'll share screen, John, is that all right, John?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and you may want to also, I think, when you say unqualified opinion, I mean, some of us know what that means, but some probably don't. Will you also clarify what that is?
Sure.
too?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, Mary, if you're going to share screen, do you want to go up to the audit report?
Like to the top?
Yeah, it's going to be page 7.
Okay. Actually, I think here, I'll
Page 7
uncheck.
of the PDF.
Okay.
Or I can
Page
share.
7 of your report.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll find it.
Yeah, while you're finding that, so I'll just start. So I'll just quickly go over our opinions, what we're giving an opinion on, what we don't give an opinion on, what the results of the audit are. The page that Marion was on, we'll talk about that. That's the summary of audit results that gets submitted to the federal government.
You want your page 7? That doesn't look right.
PDF page 7.
PDF page 7. Okay, that's
Yep.
different.
So it's page 1 of our actual page 1. So that's very specific for the federal audit, that summary of audit results. That's what the federal government wants to see because it summarizes both the audit of the financial statements as well as the single audit. Because sometimes you can choose to issue a single audit separate from the financial statements. And so they want to know the information that is coming from the financial report as well as the single audit. And that's all information that we have to input into when it gets uploaded to the federal audit clearinghouse. All right, so this is our audit report. And like Amy said, it's an unqualified or an unmodified report. So those two terms get used interchangeably, depending on who you're talking to. Like the federal government likes the term unmodified. What that means is it's a clean opinion, and it's very accountants, auditor, dork language. I don't know why we unqualify something if it's actually good, but if you have a qualified or a modified opinion, that means that we modify the language of our audit report. So every audit report that you read in a government, and even under FASB, so private companies, nonprofits, they're all very similar language. Because this is a government, it's going to have other language that's more relevant to governments. But not trying to get too long-winded. It's very standard language, and it has to be specific language. Kind of like our communication letter that Andrew was talking about. That's very standard language that we're required to use. And so the second paragraph, in our opinion, the company financial statements present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental type activities of each major fund for the year ended June 30th, 2024. So that is our opinion. So that language right there signifies unmodified or unqualified. Now, if there were issues that we found during the audit that, let's say, if we were testing your revenue and you didn't have backup for your revenue and we could not test the revenue or get comfortable with those balances, then we would modify this report to say the financial statements are presented fairly except for, and then we would have to describe the situation, and then we have to give a basis for our qualified opinion. So unqualified, unmodified, that just it signifies that we didn't have to change the audit report because of issues that came up that we couldn't give an opinion on in the financial statements. The other opinion that we can give is an adverse opinion, where we either have significant disagreements or the records are poor enough that we can't get enough evidence to support an opinion. Then we give an adverse opinion, which is a negative opinion. It just means that there's issues on your end that need to be fixed. So unmodified or unqualified signifies a clean opinion. If you scroll down a little bit, Marion, the next section just talks about your responsibilities for the financial statement. The financial statements are yours. You're required to, we help Marion prepare the financial statements, but we have her give a thorough review. A lot of the notes need to be worded the way you guys want them worded. And so we have her review everything, make sure that everything is the way that they want it. In a perfect world, which we don't live in, but in a perfect world, you would draft your financial statements and give us your financial statements, and then we would request information based on the financial statements. So we would break all of the financial statements, we would request your trial balance, and then we would break down those financial statements into the grouping schedules of the trial balance, and then break the trial balance again down into individual sections, and then maybe into groups of transactions or specific transactions, and that's what we're testing. In the real world, what we typically have happen is we get your trial balance, and then we break it down and we do all of the testing, and the financial statements become basically the last step or the final product of the audit. And that's, I think it's a misconception. I've been in a couple of meetings where, because we help draft, then there's been a concern that we're auditing our own work. And that's not necessarily the case because the financial statements are the very final product. All of our audit work and all of the test work is already done. We've already tested the trial balance. It's just a matter of putting it into financial statement form. However, because we draft the financial statements, there's controls that we have to have internally that really protect us from that self-review threat. So there's nothing like we can't rely on Marion's ability to review the financial statements and that she's qualified, she understands accounting, she understands the financial statements. Based on our standards, we can no longer rely on that in order to reduce that threat. So what we have to do is we have to have other controls in place to make sure that that threat is minimized. And what we do is we just have a non-engagement partner who has government CPE that reviews all of our financial statements that we draft. And that's been a big concern. I peer review other firms, and our firm also gets peer reviewed. And I just went through one right now of a firm in California, where, you know, they didn't document that and they really don't have anybody. So that is going to be a finding for them, is that they don't have those controls in place. So that's something that, I mean, you as an audit committee, that's what you need to look for when you're looking for auditors, is do they have those types of controls in place, unless you're going to draft your own financial statements. The other responsibility that you have for the audit is if there are conditions or events that arise during the year that would prohibit you from continuing as a going concern, you are required to do analysis to identify the issues. You know, what are the options that you have? Can you overcome those issues? This all came about because of COVID. So nobody wanted to talk about the negative effects in their financial statements that COVID was having on their business. And people rely on your audited financial statements. And if you don't describe that, then, you know, they're going to rely on that. If something happens and you fold up shop, then, you know, if they lent you money, all of a sudden they're out that money. So now it's a standard requirement that if there are conditions or events, you know, if all of your federal funding was to be completely cut off, then that's a condition or event that would possibly prohibit you from continuing to operate into the future. So that's something that, you know, then you have to analyze that. And that's also one of our responsibilities. If you'll
John,
scroll up.
John, let me just real quick take advantage of your raising the point about, you know, if federal money got cut off. This is one of the things, the majority of our funding comes from the federal government through USDOT. And so this is, you know, a concentration of our revenue. So this is you know, I don't know if it's regarded as an audit risk, but it's something that we pay attention to and be careful about. And it's also one of the reasons that we, you know, maintain a sort of a modest, unobligated balance as we go, so that, and this was a sort of a practice that we developed some time ago, so that if it did happen that the federal government shut down or they failed to reauthorize the surface transportation bill, so there was a lag for some period of time, we wouldn't have to go lay off our employees. You know, we would be able to continue compensating them and maintain our operations for, you know, some period of time until things got, until Congress, you know, reauthorized the legislation. So that's a risk that we pay attention to and we account for.
Yep. So, and just to clarify, like Andrew said, it's not considered an audit risk for us. It's a financial statement risk. Basically that economically, if you were to lose that is going to negatively impact your organization. So it's a, you know, a concentration risk inside the financial statements or your entity. And that's something that we look at very specifically inside the engagement, is if there is substantial revenue that's coming from one source, that becomes a concentration risk. That the risk is if you don't get that, how is that going to affect the entity, and are you going to continue to operate into the future? So, and you can look at this last bullet point, just go up, scroll down, back down. Sorry. That last bullet point right there just outlines that we also have to look for those conditions or events that are going to affect you as a going concern. So both sides really have that responsibility now. And that changed, like I said, as a result of COVID. The next section requires supplementary information. I'm sorry for those of you who listen to me present audits all the time. This is repetitive information, but it's good information so you understand how the financial statements are put together. So there are certain sections of the financial statements that do not fall under our opinion. So it's unaudited information. That is the management's discussion analysis. And then there is a section called required supplementary information. And that information is required to be with the financial statements per GASB, or the standards board. However, it's not part of the basic financial statement, so it doesn't fall under our opinion. I don't know why. I do know the reason why they want it with it is it because it gives more readability and understandability to the financial statements. So the MD&A is a good place to start, which is why it always precedes the basic financial statements, because it's more readability. It's more comparative data from last year to this year in more dialogue rather than just raw numbers. So if you don't like to get in the weeds of the numbers, then the MD&A is a great place to kind of get an overview of, okay, what's in the financial statements. And that's where that is. All right, supplementary information. So there's another section called that is supplementary information. And this is information that either you as an entity have chosen to include in the financial statements, or it's required by an external party. In your case, it's the single audit. So anytime you have a single audit, that becomes supplementary information because it's supplemental to the financial statements. But that opinion always follows what the opinion is on the financial statements as they relate back to the financial statements. So all of the numbers in the financial statements, you may not be able to find exact numbers of grants because they're grouped in with, like federal funding on the financial statements. But we make sure that the schedule of federal awards agrees to the financial statements. So that's why in supplementary information, it's typically like if you're a part of a normal government, it's going to be your non-major funds that get presented in detail. Where in the basic financial statements, it's all rolled up into one column. And the same with the schedule of federal awards, that's going to show the details of the grants, who you received them from, where they came from, and how much you spent. Whereas in the financial statements, that's all rolled up just into the revenue. Okay. Any questions so far?
No, thank you so much. We appreciate your help.
If you want to go down to page. So this is going to be 43 of the PDF. So the next report that we're required to issue is a report that just outlines that we've performed the audit in accordance with government auditing standards. It's actually page 37. If you're looking at the actual page numbers. Yep, right there. Go back up one page. So this report, what we do as part of our audit in accordance with government auditing standards is we're required to look at your internal controls. We will do detailed walkthroughs and we will document what the controls are in each process. And just so you guys understand what a control is we will look at a process. So if somebody is performing a reconciliation, we can outline what the policies and procedures say, and then we go follow that process. So we look at the process, but then the control is who does what when inside the process. So it's somebody, reconciles each month at the end when the bank statement is released. So we make sure that there's a who, what, when multiple times in a process. There should always be the initial control and then a review control. So somebody should be reviewing what somebody else has done, just to make sure that things are being done accurately. What we're looking for is our control deficiencies because we don't give an opinion on your controls. But what we're looking for are control deficiencies that will rise to the level of a significant deficiency or a material weakness. And those two are significant enough that if we find something like that, it signifies to me as a partner that there's a pretty good chance or almost 100% chance that the financial statements are misstated because there's a significant control deficiency or a material weakness. That means that in the normal course of doing your operations or performing processes, mistakes can be made that are material in nature that you're not catching or correcting before it's given to us as auditors. So that's typically what we're looking for when we're doing control testing. However, we didn't have any material weaknesses, or we didn't find any, and we didn't find any significant deficiencies. That's not to say that somewhere in a process there isn't any, but as far as financial reporting goes, you know, we didn't find any control deficiencies that we would say, hey, you need to correct this. Nor did we find any material differences in the financial statements. So that's also another test, is if we're doing all of our test work and we don't find any material weaknesses, then that's also another kind of a testimony that your controls are actually functioning the way they should. All right, if you can go to the next report. So the next report we're required to issue is for the state auditor. Every year they outline areas that we're required to test. For the council this year, it was your compliance with budgetary requirements, fund balance, and then the fraud risk assessment. Go down one page, Marion. Keep going, one more page. So this is the next opinion that we give. We give an opinion on your compliance with these specific areas. So that's also an unmodified or an unqualified opinion. So we didn't find any compliance issues related to those areas. I do have to put the caveat in there because a lot of people, even other auditors, I've heard them refer to this as the Utah State Compliance Legal Guide. This is not legal compliance opinion. It's not a legal opinion. We're not attorneys. We leave that up to the attorneys. This is just mere compliance with what Utah code says. And it's also very specific to these areas. So this is not an opinion on the entirety of Utah State Code. So a lot of times what will happen is I'll get feedback, you know, from a citizen or, you know, board member that says, you know, hey, we just found this problem that we're not doing this section of Utah code and it's a big issue. And you guys said that we were in compliance. Well, we didn't test that. We were required to test your budgets, the fund balance, and the fraud risk assessment. And that's what this is. That's what this opinion is. Because the state auditor has said, this is what we feel like is important. So we're getting directive from the Utah State Auditor on what they want us to test specifically as part of state compliance. I think you guys know my opinion on the fraud risk assessment. What we're looking for there is that you guys actually fill it out. You talk about it in a board meeting, and then it's submitted to the state in a timely manner. I don't look at your score. I don't care what your score is. We're going to do our own fraud risk assessment every time we perform your audit. And I don't feel like the fraud risk assessment, the way it is now, is really doing the job that it should be. Not that I disagree with all the principles in the fraud risk assessment, but Wasatch Front Regional Council is different than Salt Lake City. They're different than Box Elder County. Yes, that's a shout out to you, Commissioner Lee. But everybody's different. And so they want every government organization in the state of Utah is required to fill out the same fraud risk assessment. And one size doesn't fit all. So where you guys have a smaller staff size, you know, you may not be able to completely separate all the duties that need to be separated. I can come go through all of your procedures and you know, there may be parts of procedures where there's not complete separation. And so if there's not complete separation, what we do is we look for mitigating controls that's offsetting that risk because you don't have complete separation. And so that's a part of our fraud risk is based on what we know of your controls, what is the chance the fraud is happening inside the financial statements? So take that for what it's worth. What we care about as far as compliance goes is that you're filling it out and that you're submitting it to the state on a timely manner. But just know that we are looking at your controls and doing our own fraud risk every time we come and perform an audit. And we do a new one every year. So it's not like, oh, we did that last year, no problems. We actually will go through every year and make sure that there haven't been any changes to anything. So all right, next page. Sorry, yep, there you go. So the next report we're required to issue is for the federal government. So this one is very similar to the audit report. This is reporting on your internal controls over compliance for federal awards, as well as your compliance for internal controls or for federal awards. So the federal government requires that when we perform single audits, and when I do peer reviews, this is what I find the most on other firms that are performing single audits is they'll go test your compliance. So they'll look at your expenditures and say, yeah, we think that they're good. Like they're in compliance with the grant agreements, but they're not looking at the controls that you have in place, making sure that you will never be out of compliance. And so there's actually two sides of what we're looking at in a federal award program. And we had lots and lots of discussions. This is one of the things that we talked to Marion about probably the most in the engagement is the schedule of federal awards. How does it need to be presented? What needs to be presented on there? Which grants need to be presented on there? What does it mean when you get a grant from Cache County? Or if you give money to Cache County, how does that show on your schedule of federal awards? And bottom line, I think that Marion's been pretty adamant that you really don't want to go down the subrecipient, calling them subrecipients. So what we've decided is really, if you're sending the money out, that money needs to be showing on your schedule of federal awards. If you're getting money from somewhere else, and then you're spending the money, then it's going to show, hey, this is DOT money, but it's passed through this entity to us, and now we're going to spend the money. So really all of the expenditures on your federal awards are monies that you actually cut checks for.
John, thank you for all this detail. We do have one more agenda item after this, and our meeting
Yep.
ends in about 7 minutes. So we're going to need to wrap up on this agenda item. If you want to wrap it up for us, that'd be great.
So Andrew said in the communication letter, we did reword the communication letter. Just real quick on the significant risks. So every year we have to identify significant risks as part of our audit. It's an overall. So every audit area gets assigned a risk. Then there's overall risk for every engagement that we perform. And just know that risk is really for us, knowing that we have to perform specific tests to address every risk. So it's just it's communicating to you as a board that, hey, these are the significant risks because you are a government. This is letting you know that we are performing specific tests to address those risks, looking for material misstatements. And then, so Marion is showing the summary of audit results. So there weren't any material weaknesses or findings, either over financial statement findings or the federal awards. So an unmodified opinion, and yes, you're still considered a low risk. That doesn't really mean anything to you guys. It means more to us as auditors. It just means that the amount of coverage that we have to test goes down if you're low risk. The result, if you happen to be high risk, it means that we're going to have to test more of your federal awards, which is then going to be more costly to you as an entity if you happen to get there. So, is there any questions for me?
I don't see any questions. Anybody have any? I'm just grateful for our team and for John, for your good work, and then our financial team for their good work, because this looks great. This audit does. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
And if there are questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime.
All right.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the explanation too. So, Madam Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion to recommend that the regional council accept this audit.
Thank you. We have a motion from Mayor Silvestrini. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, second from Commissioner Perry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that'll move forward to the full council, and we appreciate your help with that. We have our last agenda item, which is the executive director report. Andrew, do you have anything for us?
Just very briefly, first, I just want to ask Marion, Wayne, Kevin, Andrea, if there's anything else that you think needs to be brought up with the budget committee?
I have one really brief item. I just want to let the budget committee know officially, we did consult with Andrew and with our budget committee chair and our board chair, and have decided to change our operational account from Wells Fargo to Zions. This doesn't affect any of you, but I do like to be transparent about that kind of thing. And so I just want to have that on the record. We did some research and we think this is going to be a good move, both for stewardship of the funds and for customer service and local representation and that kind of thing.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Marion. One other thing is that we will next in 2025 iteration of the budget committee, we may want to reevaluate whether this time and day, a Thursday at 4, is the best time to do these meetings. We do them on Zoom, and so really they can be done more flexibly. Andrea will take a look at that, and I don't know if any of you have an immediate reaction like, yeah, 4 o'clock on Thursday is a terrible time, or it's as good as any. Any immediate reaction to that?
It's as good as any.
I
Okay.
agree.
Yeah, everybody's nodding yes. Okay, got it. We said this already, 2 weeks from today, we have our full council meeting where we will bring these items again. Councilmember Winder Newton, as the chair of the budget committee, will present these in a more succinct form, just for final action by the council to make the budget, approve the budget amendment, and to accept the audit report. The only other thing I want to note very briefly is I think you all know, at least from reading our newsletters and all, that last week we had a really cool week because we were the hosts for our national conference, the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations. So 500 or so of the coolest planners from around the country got together and like nerded out hard on transportation planning and growth and infrastructure funding. Commissioner Stevenson came as our vice chair for a portion of that, and Mayor Ramsey participated on a panel discussion. And it was really great. In our world, it was really great. There was a lot of appreciation for the work that we do here in transportation planning, and people just loved coming to Utah as well. So we were proud to host that conference. I just wanted to share that with you. And unless anybody has anything for me or any questions for me, that concludes my report.
Andrew? Yeah, Andrew, just one thing that I found interesting is, if you remember, I think Deidre asked how many people in the room had never been to Utah before. And there were quite a few that put their hands up. It was quite interesting. I wouldn't have expected that, but it goes to show you that still a whole lot of people out there we need to get their money spending in this town. So
right. Yeah, we did an opening plenary session, and we had Mayor Ramsey as our chair, Lieutenant Governor Henderson, and Mayor Mendenhall as the host city mayor, representing sort of city scale, broader regional scale, and state scale, and having a discussion about dialogue and collaboration in Utah. And it was pretty fun. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Andrew. We always hear from people around the nation of how Utah works well together, and that we have great plans and great people and collaborative effort, which is, I know, something that many of them wish that their states had. So good job. All right. Well, we have our next meeting January 9th, and unless there's any other business, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all.